Bob Bauer is a senior advisor to the Biden campaign, a former White House counsel to President Obama, and joins me now. Bob, it's great to see you. Haven't seen you since the election, so congratulations on the results. As you're active, I know, in the transition and leading these battles. And so far, I think 50 or 51 cases have been filed, and just a majority have been rejected, dismissed. The federal judges, even a Trump judge, notably in the Third Circuit in Pennsylvania, was very stringent in his comments about the whole case. So where does it stand now? Are they going to just keep filing cases and you're going to keep showing up in court?
It's not clear what they're doing other than embarrassing themselves. You're quite right. I mean, the judge in the Third Circuit, who, by the way, I think you're referring to the same Pennsylvania case, is a Trump appointee who said they presented no allegations, no proof. This tracks what a lot of judges are saying. A judge in Wisconsin who said their allegations were absolutely bizarre. And we know now that the Attorney General of the United States has said he sees no evidence of fraud that would have affected the outcome of the election. The president hasn't fired him, but previously fired the official responsible for cybersecurity and infrastructure security at the Department of Homeland Security, who had said it was the most secure election in American history. So Trump fired him for saying that. It's not clear what they hope to accomplish here. As I said, I think they're embarrassing themselves. The courts are dismissing these cases as rapidly, fundamentally, as they're filing them. Since Election Day, they've lost 43 lawsuits. I mean, they're really setting records for failures in this area. I mean, just abject failures in this area. And I just want to amend one piece of what Pete Williams said. Not that anything he said was inaccurate. It was all accurate. But he made a point of saying that there are all sorts of technical reasons, including delays in bringing these claims, that account for how the courts are responding negatively to them. But I want to add that there is an overriding reason why these suits are failing at any point that they were brought, whether they were brought before the election on some issues or certainly after the election. They're failing because there's absolutely no evidence in any of these cases. And that's what comes screaming through all of these decisions. The judges are scratching their heads, asking them, what case are you bringing forward? And there is no case. There's no evidence. It's all a fantasy. And that's why it's crashing and burning in the sort of publicly embarrassing way that it is.
And in fact, as Pete and all of us have been reporting, in some of these cases, in one case in particular, they said to Giuliani, are you claiming fraud? I think it was a Pennsylvania case. And he said, no, we're not claiming fraud. So they're not saying in court, because they know they can't lie to a judge. They're not saying what they're saying publicly in these so-called hearings, which are being held in hotel suites or in front of, the Four Seasons Plumbing. And
yes, that's
whatever
absolutely. That's a very important
the name
point.
of that place was.
To add to this,
let me ask you about Bill Barr.
Legal carnival.
No, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
To add to this sort of perverse legal, no problem. To add to this perverse legal carnival that we're seeing, your point is exactly right. There are lawyers inside the courtroom who have to say the opposite of the public messaging that are being put out by Jenna Ellis and Sidney Powell and others. They have to say, no, in fact, we're not alleging fraud. That's not what we're doing here, because they are in a position where they can't lie to the judge. But they make outlandish claims in the pleadings before they're asked by the judge, and they make outlandish pleadings in their messaging. And I just add, there are law firms that were representing the campaign at the outset of this contest, of this pseudo challenge, and they've resigned. So now there's this sort of ragtag collection of lawyers who, as I said, are just creating this monumental spectacle of legal failure.
Well, let me ask you about the Attorney General, because we've seen a complete breakdown of any firewall between the White House and the Justice Department in terms of prosecutions, of pardons, of what cases to proceed with, what cases to drop, whom to go after. Special counsels being brought in, or rather former, U.S. attorneys being brought in to look into things, to the enemies list. So Bill Barr now split with the president on whether there was election fraud. And now the president pressuring him publicly and saying he'll make a decision how he feels about him, whether he still has confidence in him, he said to Kristen Welker, depending on what happens in the next couple of weeks. Basically saying, switch your position on election fraud, and maybe I won't embarrass you by firing you, was certainly the implication.
Yes, well, of course. And I mentioned earlier, he fired Christopher Krebs for saying that the election was secure and there was no fraud. And here is the part that is just so darkly comic. Does he imagine that the courts are not hearing, that legislators are not hearing, that members of Congress are not hearing the pressure that he's putting on his own officials to lie about the outcome of the election? I mean, this is only adding to the clear-cut view everybody has of the complete baselessness of all of this. The political pressure he's tried to apply to state officials who had to turn it away, most recently in Georgia, just refusing to do his bidding. It is just an extraordinary public collapse of these claims, and everything he does makes it look even worse and prejudices his position in every possible direction.
The Trump legal strategy seems to be also targeting major cities that are majority black when they talk about what's happening in Philadelphia, Detroit, and Atlanta and other cities. Is there a civil rights case at all against them?
There's no question that the targeting of these cities and these particular communities and the code words that they're using for the kind of quote unquote fraud that they say is typical in those communities exposes, I think, the dark underside of what they're doing here. Absolutely exposes it. At this point, however, the election is lost. He will be leaving the scene. People worried for some time whether Donald Trump would refuse to leave. What we have seen is really quite remarkable. I do want to pause here, particularly in honor of officials like Jocelyn Benson. Across the country, Democrats and Republicans have stood up to this, and he's going to leave. And the election was held. The voters were heard. It's over. And I do think that while there are all sorts of legal claims that could be made here, there, and the other place about the conduct of the lawyers and of the principals in this case, including the president himself, one thing stands out very clearly, which is the system held together extraordinarily well and also did so in an election held under extraordinarily challenging circumstances in the middle of a pandemic. So for all of that, he huffed and he puffed, but he could not blow the house down.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.